Hey guys, I know it's been a while. I have been playing Diablo 4. Now I've been sinking dozens of hours into this, and I just wanted to have a quick impromptu conversation completely off the script, just discussing where I think the game is and where I think it should go. This is just one man's opinion, so take it with a grain of salt as always. Now, immediately what I noticed in Diablo 4 is that the design philosophy had changed completely. Now, this is one of the things I brought up in my last Diablo 4 video, where, some people were worried that the lack of an endgame that is satisfying could be a failure in the eyes of fans. And, some people didn't really like that video. They were like, oh, it's just clickbait, this, that, and the other. But I really genuinely felt at the time that if they did not have a strong endgame experience, that they could fail in Diablo 4. Now, the good news is that partially I was wrong. I do think that the endgame experience for Diablo has been a fantastic ride up until about level 80. Now, I have three characters. I have a rogue who is 85, 86. I have a barbarian who's 75, and I have a sorcerer who's 72. Now, all of those characters have endgame gear. They are geared up. They have the right aspects. They have the right paragon. And what I can say is that once you get to that point, it's more of an incremental climb towards 100. You start to change out little pieces of your gear. You maybe re-roll some affixes and try to power up your gear. Now, for those of you who, have no idea what I'm talking about, basically on your gear, you can change out certain stats, which can basically make you stronger. Now, some of these stats are better than other stats, but for the most part, you will always have a plus to your damage or your defense or your health or whatever it is. Now, what the Diablo grind is, for anyone who has played Diablo, is get to the end game, grind the dungeons. But in this case, Diablo 4, you grind the open world activities as well. You grind the Hell Tides, you grind the PvP, and you do the Nightmare Sigils, Nightmare Dungeons, which is like the Rift dungeons from Diablo 3, kind of an end game activity. But once you get there and you're hitting the pinnacle content, Uber Lilith, these kind of things, you start to notice that there is a very large gap between where you are, which might be 70, 80 to 100 and Uber Lilith. Like there's a very big power difference there, and only certain builds and certain players can actually kill the Uber boss. Now, when we think of this in a retrospective manner, when we look to previous games, I think, okay, well, super hard bosses in previous games are also kind of the same. When we first encountered them, we couldn't beat them. It was a grind to get the gear, and then suddenly a new difficulty level would be released. Now, in this instance, Diablo 4 will also have a difficulty Torment 5. It's actually been leaked. You can go and look at some of the stuff. Obviously, it hasn't been leaked in its entirety, but some of the things have been leaked, like the gems, etc. Now, what's quite interesting is that we don't have set bonuses yet. We don't have what would be the equivalent of primal sets, which is basically perfectly rolled stat gear. And that's kind of like the creme de la creme of Diablo, for me at least. And we don't have that yet. So right now there's a kind of empty experience where you're kind of grinding your character. You're trying to get these very rare rolls on your gear to make the experience better. And sometimes I'm worried, okay, the leveling experience is great depending on the character you have. Once you get to the end game, it's a completely different ballgame. And I think that the main problem is when you have a mix of players between casual and more hardcore players, it's going to be very difficult to find the middle ground, because do you make the game deliberately slower, less powerful, less quick, so that the players can enjoy the world, the artwork, playing the characters, the lore, everything, right? Or do you gear your end game strategy and also your leveling strategy to the newer players or the more hardcore players? This is the main kind of sticking point. It's how do you balance that? Because right now, if you look at the classes, you have the Sork, who is very weak. Now, some people might be like, oh, she has an Ice Shards build, it's really strong, blah, 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 yada, yada, yada. You saw the the Blizzard kill Uber Lilith in like 2 seconds, one, that's going to be nerfed. So just expect that. That's going to be nerfed. And if you don't expect that, you're just inhaling a copious amount of copium. It's going to be nerfed, right? Just like the Barb was nerfed. So you have the Sork, you have the Druid, and you have the Necro, which are, I would say, in my opinion, like the 3 weakest classes. Fundamentally, they have issues with either their mana, or it takes too long to set them up. Like, for instance, in the Druid, you need uniques and legendaries and everything to make it perfectly functioning. Whereas some of the other classes like Rogue and Barb can, you set up a couple of things in them and they're good to go. And I think that the balancing is going to be very tricky, because you want to have the players playing through the campaign, playing through the leveling experience and enjoying themselves, but you also don't want that enjoyment to be linked to the builds and the characters being overpowered. Otherwise power creep happens, and then you have the Diablo 3 experience where things are doing trillions and billions and multi-trillions of damage, right? Like, you want to have an experience that you play through the leveling experience. It's a fun, engaging time where you get to experience the lore and the campaign and the writing and the voice work, which is excellent. But at the same time, you want to scratch the itch of a power trip, a power fantasy. And when you get to endgame, you don't really have that. You can definitely see the design philosophy has changed in that sense. You don't have that ridiculous power unless you're doing some kind of exploit. And for me, I don't know whether that's the right approach. I do get it. They are trying to have a different pace. And if I show you a clip here, so if I just play this on the screen, this is me farming. This is me farming a dungeon for experience. So let's watch this. So you can see this here. So I'm on my rogue. I'm getting some loot. Let me skip ahead a little bit. I'm just farming. We're gonna reset the dungeon and go back in. So we're here now. We're gonna go back in, and you're gonna see the difference. So this is my rogue. The rogue is very powerful, very strong range build. Everything's exploding. Everything feels really good, and it feels night and day from the Sork experience that I had. So leveling up my Sork, this was very tedious. I didn't like it. It didn't feel good. Same thing, with my friends and they played the Druid, or like they played the Necromancer. It's very painful. And I think to have a multifaceted level of success, there's a couple of things they're going to need to balance out. One, they're going to need to fine-tune the gear so that it's not skewed one way onto attack or one way onto defense. They're going to have to design the aspects, the future ones, so that there is the opportunity for all classes to clear the hardest content, and for them to also feel good as you are playing them. So that's going to be a challenge. I'm not sure how they're going to approach it, because, like I said, the design philosophy is very different here. Now, you can see me playing on the screen. This is a very interesting build. I'm playing with 2 other players. So the HP and the damage is scaled differently, and you can see that the rogue does decent amount of damage and AoE clear. Now, if I switch this clip over, and we go to something else, so I'm going to turn it to this one now. Forgive me. This is my Sork gameplay. So you'll see here, let's just enlarge the screen, that the gameplay is very, very different. This is by no means like the meta leveling build, but it was one that is fairly strong. There's still a lot to be had there. It's not as strong, and I'm playing by myself, so it's easier. And there is a vast difference in what you do in this game, and I think that when you consider all the different gear sets, all the options, everything pushes you to one direction or another. If we go to, let's say, max roll, where max roll is like kind of like the go-to for character planning. So let's open this up here and let's go to build guides. And we have a look. So these are all the character guides. So let's go through the barbarian. So the barbarian has 1, 2, 3 endgame guides, right? If I go to the tier list here and let's go to the endgame tier list, you can see which ones are right at the top. You can see the whirlwind barb, the rogue, the werewolf druid, the bone spear. Like there's only a couple, and then the rest are like, some of them don't even have builds because they're so bad, right? And this is what I mean. Like the builds and the characters are very kind of skewed. If you have a look at the top ones here, you have necro builds, you have rogue, and you have a whirlwind barb and a druid. There's no sork builds here whatsoever. In the A tier, you then have some sork builds. And this is kind of like the main problem with the characters and the enjoyment for some people. I know I went a bit like kind of off on a tangent there, but I think it's important to notice these kind of things. Like when it comes to the build guides, when it comes to just constructing a character that you love and that is satisfying to play, there isn't that much to choose from. And if you have a look at some of these guides, they're very particular on what you need to run. You follow a step-by-step thing. You know, it's not like Path of Exile where there's limitless choices in terms of what you can build. Now, obviously, that's a caveat here. Path of Exile, to be successful, you have to follow to the season, the season modifier. Otherwise, you will be like completely wrecked. But it's less punishing in Path of Exile because once you actually get the gear, once you actually, you know, roll the right stats because you rely on some maths wizards, you'll plow through the content as long as you're following the guide. Now in Diablo, you don't really have that much. You follow it to the T, you follow one of these guides. Now it doesn't always guarantee your success because the characters might be a bit out of whack. So you're relying less on the builds and more on how good the characters are. So going back to essentially the summary of the video, this is again an impromptu kind of, it's just what my initial thoughts are. I am very excited for the seasonal content. I'm excited to see what the season modifiers are. I'm wondering how much they will take from Path of Exile. Because like I said, if the characters themselves and their balance is out of whack, it doesn't matter what modifier you put on, the characters will still feel bad, and I think Path of Exile doesn't have that. You do need to follow a very meticulous guide for Path of Exile, like I said earlier, and once you do, it's very satisfying. But, you know, when you have a character, you level it up in Diablo, it's like, okay, I've leveled this up, I followed the guide to the T, but then you push higher tier nightmare dungeons, which might end up going to level 100 and above, and you're dying and you're not doing enough damage, and you're like, what's wrong? Is it me? Like, do I not know how to play video games? But no, it's actually the characters. It's just the way they're designed, and, you know, sometimes they're weaker than other character classes. And, you know, the devs have acknowledged this in one of their videos, and so that's like the key thing here. And depending on how they balance, which should be in the next week or so, like the big patch notes, and then also depending on what they decide to put as their first season kind of modifier, will determine if they can keep the momentum rolling. Because Diablo 4 is very popular. It's on the top of the Twitch charts still. I think it's on the first or second row. There's a lot to be had here, and I'm having a lot of fun with it, don't get me wrong. I'm playing with my friends, I'm really enjoying it, but I think that there are definitely some glaring weaknesses, especially with like the end game stuff. Will you have fun if you're a more casual player who has a couple of hours a day to spend playing, or maybe just on the weekends? Absolutely, you're going to have a blast. The leveling experience does feel very good. Some classes have worse leveling experiences like Barb and Druid, but some classes have fantastic ones like Rogue and Sork. They are vastly different as you level them up. They are vastly different, and there's quite a few builds that are viable in the leveling experience. And by leveling, I mean like 0 to 50, because enemies are much weaker. You know, they'll succumb easier to multiple parts of your kit, and you can play around to see what's good for you. But yeah, that's kind of like my initial thoughts. I know it's very off script, like I said. There's not much planning behind this. I just wanted to kind of get my thoughts out, because I'm not going to publish the review until the seasonal content is out and I get to see what the battle pass has entail for us and what the modifier is and how fun it is and what adjustments they'll make in the big patches. There's some quality of life things coming with Nightmare Dungeons, and I'm pretty sure Paragon will get certain tweaks as well, because they nerfed it quite hard at the start. So I think it's going to get some nice tweaks there. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, stay tuned. Come and join me on my streams. Have a chat. If you want to learn about the game, ask me any question you want. Like I said, I have played a long time so far, and I don't know how many hours I've actually played right now. But like you see, I have 3 characters who are quite a high level, and I have a lot of pack mules. But I've really had a lot of fun with it. So anyways, guys, let me know what you think in the comments down below. Again, this is a really quick video, just filling in the kind of the gap, because I know it's been a while since I published. I am working on the review. I am also working on Final Fantasy 16. So stay tuned, and if you like the content, like and subscribe. You can also catch me on twitch.tv/BitofBreakdown, and I'll catch you soon. Bye.